So welcome to a class act. Really excited about this one. I can't wait to get started because most organisations adopting AI right now are asking for faster horses, bolting agentic AI onto the same old processes, then wondering why nothing actually changes. So if you're trying to take agentic AI from a slick demo to something that genuinely scales across your organisation, this is the one to listen to. My guest, Stuart Bell, went from Java developer to one of the people shaping how the biggest financial services firms adopt agentic AI at enterprise scale. We get into this why the demo to production gap is really a strategy gap, why you treat AI agents as products and not one-off projects, and the question Stuart says every leader should be asking and almost nobody is. A quick ask, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit subscribe. This helps to support the show and keep episodes and guests like this coming. So let's get into this. All right then, Stuart. So you started as a Java developer and you're now one of the people shaping how large financial services organisations adopt agentic AI at enterprise scale. How did that journey happen?
I'm looking forward to the conversation today,
Yep.
Michael. It's great to get this set up. It didn't go in one step, clearly. And starting out life as a Java developer was a really creative endeavor for me. And a lot of it was all about being curious. And it got me into the career that I have today. So it's taken a lot of twists and turns,
Yep.
and probably a mixture of being in the right place at the right time, but also taking on board some risk on my part. And I maybe didn't quite appreciate the risks at the time, but you've got to do that in order to move into the place where I'm in today. So moving from development work into architecture work gradually allowed me to then start moving into CTO roles. I've worked in private equity backed businesses as well as VC backed businesses. And I've also worked in big corporates. So that's what's landed me into where I am today. And I think probably for everyone, it was probably around about late 22 when I was a CTO at a business. And that was when OpenAI really started to break into the mainstream.
Yep.
And we were starting to do some early adoption there to augment the engineering team with some of the early access we had to OpenAI to really look at how we can scale the team without necessarily adding extra headcount. And just bit by bit, I've just taken that experience into another experience and then into where I am today, purely looking at AI within a big financial services firm within a regulator as well. And so there's definitely lots of interesting stories to tell that I've carried from lots of different places. But for me, it's how you can actually get something that actually works in production.
You've spoken about this before and you've said that most organisations are still asking for faster horses when it comes to AI. What do you mean by that?
This came from a range of observations and different data points that I'm seeing across the AI industry.
Yep.
And it's an interesting one because Henry Ford, he of the car, he's often been quoted as saying this, although there is actually a little bit of doubt as to where they actually said it, but it's attached to him.
Yep.
And the quote goes, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that Ford's customers in the day, they wanted to get somewhere faster, but the mental model that they had was the horse. And so the car was completely outside their frame of reference as to how that would apply to them. And what I've done is just I've taken that as a bit of an operational hypothesis or a strategic bet on how to position an AI function. And customers can tell you their problems and frustrations, but they'll frame it in solution terms based on what they already know.
Yep.
And that's exactly where we are with AI, much like where the car was back then. And the thing with AI is it's a step change technology. It's not incremental compared to something like web, mobile, digital, cloud. They seemed like big leaps forward, but the pace of them, people could go along with that pace. So at an industry level, that pattern around AI, we're asking businesses what they want from AI, and they're going to give you an incremental improvement on what already exists. That's not wrong. They shouldn't have to be the expert, but I think there is pressure on them to be so. However, that's the AI function's role, is to be that partner and work in collaboration. So you need to reframe the question, not what do you want, but more interestingly, if you started from scratch, what would this look like? And what you start to see by contrast is you go from answers around, well, we want to look at how we apply AI to this process, or we want to make this process more efficient. But what you have there is that you're still seeing the same process existing. And then you need to really ask, well, what's the real outcome? And what you start to find is that you get to the real answers of, we need to reduce cost by 20%. We need to improve customer satisfaction by 40%. We need more elasticity to cope with scale. And so starting from that problem, not the existing solution, that yields quite fundamentally different results. And that's where we need to look at how we utilize AI. So that's the faster horses problem that I'm seeing.
I suppose sometimes when you really start asking the right questions, you'll probably find some of the solutions don't actually need AI as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I often say AI can be applied to anything. It doesn't mean that you have to apply it to everything.
Yeah.
And it's a Swiss Army knife. So you need to really it's as important to push back things as it is to accept them.
Yeah. A big part of the job for people like yourself. I've been hiring across like head of AI and director of AI, and one of the main things is being able to push back to the business, the execs, the stakeholders, but also to push back to like vendors and salespeople and people coming to you like daily with this product that can do this and that. A big part of the job as well. So you really need to know your stuff. But everyone's seen impressive AI demos that go nowhere. Why does this keep happening?
I think you find that you get that demo to production gap is actually more of a strategy gap that you're seeing. So it isn't the technology's problem, and it's more of a strategy and expectation problem that we're seeing. And there's probably three causes for me that come to mind. First of all, the demo that you're seeing isn't real. It's got clean data, it's got curated APIs. There's probably not any legacy technology that's having to integrate with. When you move to production, that's where you hit the real challenges. And you go from that expectation as well of sponsors or senior leaders seeing something that they could do over the weekend, something that's also maybe a vendor or something saying, we've done this in 4 weeks, look where we've got to. And then the reality ends up turning out to be like 3 or 6 months. So by the time you've told them, also they're starting to move on to the next thing as well. So that's a real challenge. So the POC just does not match the reality of the delivery. And then also the POCs are just too tactical. They don't actually answer the things that matter. When you really look at it, they're really going for the novelty part of AI. And then if you start to do the other parts around it, unfortunately, you have to get into things like governance, certainly into regulated environments. What does autonomy look like? What does the real data look like that you're needing to operate to yield those results? And if you've not answered those questions within the POC, and these things are entirely preventable as well, and if you start to actually do that within the POC, you're starting to close that gap. So I think you get stats out there like from Databricks I saw recently in their state of AI agents and from this year, they were saying that companies that actually use AI governance, they're getting at least a 10x return of projects actually going into production. So that shows you in real terms that just focusing on the novelty part, you're immediately starting from quite a difficult position.
Definitely. Yeah. We ran a AI event in Barclays on Tuesday, and there was a lot of talk about this from the panel, that people have been in data for a long time and just saying how they've been banging on about the importance of governance and good data and really having your house in order for years now. It's not new, but the people who have really built the fundamentals and took the time over the years to get this right and in place and done all the kind of boring stuff that people might think, just to really keep the tech and systems in place, are the people who are winning now and can really get AI adopted and into production faster as well. So it's been real interesting chats around this lately.
Yeah, and we can touch on some of the boring parts later. I think I've got a few thoughts on that too.
Oh, ideal. Brilliant. All right, because you apply a product lifecycle approach to AI agents. Most people don't think about it that way. Why does this really matter?
There's a few reasons why it matters for me. It stems from, again, previous experience of working in product companies in many different guises. But for me, when you start looking at it, AI can feel quite ubiquitous and quite ethereal and buzzwordy and so on. And giving people something to be able to point to.
Yeah.
So I think for me, when you're starting to look at an AI function in particular as well, operationally, it gives the team an identity as well. It gives them an immediate working model. You immediately have things like triage, discovery, the ability to prioritize, work intake funnel. You've got an ability to look at the value versus complexity. You're looking at stakeholder management as well. And then also structurally, it starts to solve that sprawl, right? So big companies in particular, there'll be a proliferation of agents down at either companies using ChatGPT or Copilot and so on. They've all got their own different forms of how you build agents, but that sprawl without product ownership, agents become one-off liabilities as well. So the key here is that you're starting to move from AI being a project to AI as a product. The ownership of it is really key. You need someone that cares about it. And you start to also look at each individual agent as almost being a mini SaaS platform in that sense. Mm-hmm. And you then start thinking about, how will my customer experience this? How do I customize it? What behavior do I bake into it? So you start then starting to shape it. And for me, that gives a lot more tangible nature to what you're actually working on with it all.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. And you do reframe like AI guardrails as something closer to customer experience metrics rather than risk controls as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where it leads you into next. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're right. And for me, that kind of reframe falls into sort of 3 distinct steps. So number 1 would be, as you mentioned, the guardrails as risk controls. They start to feel like friction. People talk about guardrails all the time.
Yep.
But they're not really sure about what does that mean. Does that mean we've got to go to meetings? Is it a policy? Is it some sort of regulatory thing that we've got to adhere to and so on? But the problem with that is that teams start to work around it. They'll see it as friction. They'll see it as a way to slow down where they want to go faster. So they will then start to work around these things. And that's a problem. And then step 2, I would say, reframing them as UX metrics, for me, makes it more actually a creative endeavor. So again, putting your product hat on, you're looking at it more from like a quality signal rather than a constraint. And what that then means is when people talk about controls, and that means the guardrails, you're then starting to say, okay, I want to look at what KPIs I want to measure success with for what I'm building here. And therefore, those success metrics can start to become controls that then allow me to put a bit of a harness around the behavior of the AI. So it's actually being intentional in the way that I want it to work and behave. And also you can measure it. So you can then start to improve it. You can take pride in it. So actually those controls start to become design goals for you. And then you're not then trading speed for haste if you skip all of that. Those are 2 quite different things. So for me, that is meaning that you're actually adhering and ticking those boxes around your regulatory needs.
Yeah.
But you're doing it in a way that's actually fun and creative as well, and actually really important in order to design this so that it allows it to scale. So the ultimate thing is that governance should actually be a big enabler in organizations to make it scale overall.
Definitely. There's a lot of talk at the moment about the guardrails and people talking about how important it is to have things set up correctly from day one. I've had a few good examples on that recently, which has been really interesting. But how do you decide how much freedom to give an agent and when it needs to orchestrate others?
So that's a good one.
Yeah.
I think there's probably, again, a couple of dimensions to think through there. You've always got to start with that business outcome. So again, faster horses.
Yep.
Don't ask what you want. You really got to look at what's the outcome and then work back the way from there, because that starts to define what the goal should be. And then you're also then looking at the autonomy level. So how much independent decision-making can the agent that you're looking to build exercise in realistic terms? Then you're looking at, well, what's the complexity of the task? How many steps are involved? How many systems or tools does it need to integrate and call? And what dependencies does it have for it to touch? And all of that then starts to allow you to work out what that wider span of control is. More likely it needs to orchestrate others. You will start to naturally come to that conclusion. But then also your governance complexity is starting to increase, and it's not doing it in a linear fashion either.
Yeah.
So your autonomy levels, you can start to map that against product types. So your agent type is a product. So again, applying product thinking, you can start to have a nice kind of taxonomy emerging out of this. And eventually, again, if you're doing all this right, you're then in a position where you've got your lower level agents, and you need those agents in order to orchestrate. If you don't have them, you've got nothing to orchestrate with. So again, it's a bit of a Lego kind of puzzle that you're having to build here. And there's things that you've got to watch out for there too. People talk about hallucination rates, for example. And at that level, when you've got sub-agents, you get things where hallucination happens in little increments. They feed back up, they go back down, they feed back up, they go back down. And what you end up having things like is a rumor mill that starts to happen. So the amplification of that rumor mill, if you've got it spanning across a bigger part of your business, you have to bake all this in from the outset and not leave it as an afterthought. So all of these things are, I think, for me, different dimensions that you've got to think through to work out what freedom do you give this.
Yeah. God, it's a big job for people like yourself. Seems a lot to think about. I suppose you need a good team around you as well, Stuart. So it's important to hire the right people.
Yeah,
as well.
Definitely. Yeah, really important. Personality as well as expertise is really vital.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because you do talk about like AI teams needing a hunter-gatherer mindset. What does that mean in practice?
This is obviously something that I've observed from the likes of sales teams, right?
Yeah.
If you speak to sales teams, they'll talk about a mix of people that are, you have customers that just naturally come to you and say, I want X units of this product. And you go, great, I'll get that sorted for you, sale done. You've got other people that are more in the hunter mode, where they're actually proactively going out to generate a sale and convince people that are maybe not even thinking about that product. So I took that analogy as well and built that into a bit of a posture for looking at how an AI function should interact and engage with a customer base, whether that's internal or external. Actively hiring people as AI product managers from a product background, they've naturally got that curiosity, they've got that experience of really looking at what's the problem, not the solution as well. So they naturally start to give me a bit of a hunter mindset. And I think there's probably a lot of businesses out there. And again, from what I observe too, you have a mix of waiting for business units or customers to come to you with ideas. And that's entirely valid. And some of them actually are really good. And you still want to encourage that because that's encouraging innovation across a wider ecosystem. But I think you also have to challenge the business too and be proactive. You need to provoke. And again, it comes back to that theme of faster horses. You're starting to look at things through that AI lens. And you're then also hiring people with expertise in that, in both AI and product, to then really start to engage on what's the outcome you're trying to get to there. So again, that kind of approach allows you to start understanding what kind of criteria we're looking at, what use cases do we look for that mean we know what we're wanting to find, because we've got another part to this puzzle of building out capability, and what are the use cases we're looking for that match that, not necessarily taking the use cases coming in and then doing the due diligence on it and then working out whether they work, whether they're feasible and so on. So that healthy mix of gatherers and hunters, I think is what you need to start adopting as a bit of a posture in an AI function, irrespective of what type of organization you're in.
Definitely. Any tips to the listeners around how you find these people as well during the interviews, the hunters and the gatherers? You're
looking for people that are clearly looking outside the box. They're doing things in their own time. They're also maybe working within, in their background, tech startups, scale-ups, mid-sized businesses, people that have had a lot of strong exposure to different things. That creates a rounded person that can think on their feet as well and be a little bit independent too. Because I think you also want them to federate out across your different segments, whatever that looks like, and feel empowered to be able to own the problem that they're looking. Because ultimately, you want them to own the agent that they're building to as a product. It's not someone else's problem. They have some skin in the game in this too. So you want people that feel a sense of accountability and ownership from the outset. And if you've got people that have worked on products, they will instinctively start to have that. So you've really got to look at your network, going to different product meetups, speaking to people. And then I think just a lot of what we're doing is listening to podcasts and just understanding who's engaging with what out there. And it's really about relationships and who you know, I think, as well.
And a lot of companies are really working this out as well at the moment, aren't they? And trying to get it right and get the right people on board as well. Because there's the big it's the rise of the forward deployment engineer at the moment, isn't it? And what you're explaining there is maybe someone who can come into an organisation and really make things happen, but work across different teams, different stakeholders as well. I suppose if you've got good people like that in your team, it's going to really help you as well move things forward.
Yeah, and that multi-stakeholder piece is really tricky. And again, if you're working with someone that's from like working with a product platform background, especially if you're working across different sectors, for example, then you've naturally got quite competing views. And what you naturally need to build there is a bit of a structured work intake funnel. Again, it's just product thinking here again. How do you capture that demand? How do you assess its feasibility? I think you also have to have a bit of a mindset of finite resource. We can't do it all. Either you've not got enough people, you've not got enough cash, you've not got enough time. These are the kind of laws of physics that you're working with. So sizing up the commercial value really matters no matter which size of business you're in. And mapping it to those strategic priorities is absolutely key. So I usually break it down into a couple of different things. And this is actually validated with, there was an OpenAI white paper that came out at the end of last year about scaling AI. And they talk about value versus complexity and then risk versus reuse. So your value versus complexity is standard product thinking applied to AI. And then your risk versus reuse forces the question of, is there something here we can reuse? And what controls do we need here to offset the risk? The more you can reuse that's been proven to have the controls already in it, saves you doing it again. And that comes back to also what we were saying earlier about orchestration. So that then allows you to start to build up a bit of a layer of things that you can start to orchestrate. So risk versus reuse is key. And then defining those outcome metrics before you start. If you can't measure it before you build, you won't be able to prove it afterwards. And that leads you into a whole load of challenges, I would say. So the intake funnel isn't bureaucracy, it's how you protect the organization from building the wrong things fast, fundamentally.
Definitely. I keep coming back to the kind of teams and building and finding the right people, probably because my line of work is recruitment and trying to find people, and I kind of find it fascinating as well, because you've worked across, as we said in the intro, like private equity, real kind of early door startups, scale ups as well, and now you're working for a massive kind of large scale enterprise business. It must be quite an interesting move between the different industries and sizes of businesses as well. And I think probably when building a team, it's really important to bring that to mind as well. I would say probably if you've got people looking at enterprise mindset, startup mindset, scale up mindset, all within an AI team within any size of business really.
Yeah. I was talking to my team yesterday. We had a bit of a afternoon session just to do a bit of an end of quarter retro on a few things. And we've had a number of new people coming into the team over the last few months. And actually some of the viewpoints was that it felt like we were in a startup. And again, I've been there before where you're incubating either a new brand, a new product within an existing business. And I'm always excited about the changing a business, transforming a business, having a bit of a longer term impact, but still delivering a lot of short term value at the same time. But I think that was really, I didn't give anybody brown envelopes of money to say that. That was just a natural viewpoint that came out of the session, which I was really pleased with.
Yeah, I know. And probably down to yourself, your mindset and the way you go about building things. So that's credit to you. So it's good to hear that. It's just a topic. I could talk about this topic all day and learn about it, and I really find it interesting. I've had to really go back to school over the past year as well, if I'm being totally honest with you. I've been in data recruitment for 20 years. I've had to really go back and learn. But no,
I think though for me that's really, I think it re-energizes a lot of things that maybe you were dialed down over the years in the past. And I think for me that's the exciting thing with looking at all these different progressions on where these tools are going next.
Yeah.
For creative people, it just sparks the imagination. There's a dopamine hit that comes from it too. So for me, that's re-energizing a lot of my batteries about what you can do. And certainly it turns it on its head completely, because I've done a lot of transformation work. People talk about operating models a lot, and it's looking at how you can apply the technology and against the structure and changing processes. And with this, it really, there's so many possibilities. But if you just focus on the novelty factor, you're not going to be able to realize what the outcome needs to be ultimately. You have to really look at it as a bit of a layer cake along the way. That's the realistic nature of it.
Good.
I think there's another stat that I saw about, there's only about 2% of organizations as part of this poll that were classed as high performing from an AI perspective in terms of measuring their actual business results. So when they start looking at the end results, only about 2%, and this is from a poll that was done about this year. Again, if you look at the Databricks State of AI Agents, they're citing references from the MIT Technology Review. So these are proper, legit markers that we're seeing there. And that needs to be taken into account, because that's the reality, that's the end point.
No, 100%. It certainly does. Okay, and how do you decide what to actually build, given that every business unit thinks their use case is the most important?
I touched on earlier about that value versus complexity, and then the risk versus reuse. And you then start to really, what's good with that is you build a framework, and it's really important to make it inclusive. So I've had various circumstances now and in the past where, again, I mentioned about the competing viewpoints, no matter who the stakeholder is, whether it's an external customer or an internal stakeholder. How do you kind of arbitrate across that? You get who is shouting the loudest aspect of things, and that doesn't necessarily lead to the right outcome, because if you've got multiple points of view, but it's very hard to appease to the masses too. But I think if you start to bake into your criteria and have it as a standard, consistent framework, you can then start to get people on board. You can also evidence why the decision or how we're playing it back and shining and putting a mirror onto it, why we've come to these conclusions. And then you can give people a bit of an informed decision point. And I think for me, that is part of the negotiation and the conversation that you're having with people. It's not my point of view. These are things that we've collected across the spectrum, whether you are looking at risk teams, compliance teams, or you're looking at what our customer experience stats look like, where are we with digital, and so on and so forth. You've got to put that into the blender, because then you can put things like weightings on it as well. You can then nudge it towards these things are slightly more important than others too. And you can calibrate that against strategy as well. So you can pull it in from lots of different sources and put it all into the mixer. And then you use that as a powerful tool to then look at each individual use case, flush it through, give it a quick scorecard. And that's giving you a bit of a view across those dimensions of the risk versus reuse score versus value versus complexity score. You don't want to spend a lot of time and money on something that's got low value, because you're not going to get the output there. If you've got something that's high value but low complexity, that's a quick win. Go for that. You need those. They can't all be big strategic bets. But if it's something that's got a lot of complexity, it's really going to have to demonstrate this is really worth doing in order to yield the right return for us. And I think if you look at that through that lens, it starts to lead you to certainly a short list, which makes the conversations a lot easier to narrow down on thereafter. So again, it's just applying a bit of product thinking to this. And that's why, again, I looked at AI as a product. Because you've immediately got a lot of these mental models and frameworks that you can apply.
Is that a system? You've built your own system there? Is it a methodology you follow that's industry-wide or global?
It's probably a little bit organic and taking a bit from lots of different things. even if you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant, you've got a nice 2x2.
Yeah.
So immediately you can lay things across that, I think, in that way. So there's probably parts of Magic Quadrants that's in there too. You do have to shape it to the business. So I think the actual criteria that you're using is very intrinsic to the business. What's the risk posture? What's the risk appetite for that particular business is going to be quite different to the next one. So that's where it's not a one size fits all. But I do think the broad framework is applying time after memorial things that I've used and seen in the past, from even going back to my Sky days over 10 years ago in another big corporate, and just having a bit of a culture there too, to say, no, we're not doing that. We're going to stop that. This one's actually going to do far better. And that's where we need to put our bet on that. So it's probably a bit of an organic blend, I would say, Michael, there, but it's kind of comes from lots of different sources.
Exactly. Well, what I was thinking is it's experience. That's why people like yourself are in the jobs.
It helps normalize AI as well. It doesn't have to be this black sheep out here that actually, but actually it's not really. And I think normalizing it helps to dial down some of the hype and the expectations and get it, again, back to Gartner. Where is it on the hype cycle? You want to get it into that grounded reality where it's actually starting to turn the wheel.
A lot of times when I do these podcasts, my mind I'm thinking about different things, and it kind of just it runs about a lot of different things before you, even when you're talking. But I was thinking there, it's such an important topic, just what you mentioned there, just this, if anybody's listening to this section of the podcast, even go back a couple of minutes and listen again, because I genuinely believe, again, back to my recruitment hat on, this is probably why a lot of people go into jobs like your job, head of AI and innovation, director of AI, whatever it may be. And if they can't master what you just spoke about there and really be able to put this across the team and into their organisation, that's probably why a lot of people leave within a short time as well. I think it's such an important thing to be able to do, to be able to just not just say if stakeholders and exec teams are coming to you and want you to do this and want you to do that, being able to push it back with a formula like this and explain to them in detail why you're doing it and why you're not doing it. It's such a valuable skill to have.
And I think one of the things that we've learned is you have to also experiment up front. I think back to the POC, if you use that, I think it gives you a lot of credibility, because we're in a world of where you need to do things like model benchmarking, for example. If you take something like what's happened with Anthropic recently in the last couple of weeks with their Fable 5 model, you've got model risk baked into the system now. If you've built agents on top of certain models and you have to change the model, what effects will that have? If you've baked in, again, a bit of a harness around how you want it to behave, you swap the model out and then you can measure it. And that is hugely powerful. And I think that's how you use these experimental sandbox environments to your best advantage, because I think you're then working from an evidence perspective. Now, it's also garbage in, garbage out. So if you've not got the environment completely calibrated correctly, it's going to skew that. So you have to be really careful there. But I think that separates out the people that know what they're doing. And it comes back to just that experience again, as you say.
Definitely, 100%. And responsible AI gets talked about a lot and means very little in most organisations. What does it actually look like when it's working?
Yeah, there's a lot of buzzwords that you have to say yourself, but listen to others saying as well, and responsible AI is one of them too. For me, it's all about reframing it, and it's not a policy problem. It's not who do I have to speak to make sure we're doing it responsibly, but it's actually a delivery and an operating model problem that you're having to wrestle with. So you're looking at your real controls that you're baking in, again, back to those guardrails and looking at it from a UI experience. I don't know if there's a UIX designer role out there yet, but there might be in the future. And much like UX designers, and the ones that I've worked with in the past that are being really good, they go and get a coffee in McDonald's and they're watching people just walking up to those kiosk dashboards for hours and just observing. And you then start to then look at that from an AI point of view, and you're turning that into real controls. So that's covering ethics, safety, bias, fairness, accuracy score. How are you auditing this? and how you log in this. What customer outcome have you actually monitored there too? If you don't, again, put these in, you then don't know how it's actually performing, and you're then at risk with regulators at that stage. So it's a governance failure in financial services, not a technical incident.
Yeah.
It's a regulatory event that you're dealing with when it comes to responsible AI. Things like customer duty, the accountability doesn't disappear because it's an agent that's made it now. The senior manager that's in that area of the business is still accountable for that outcome, irrespective of how it's done. And it's interesting because the FCA are currently going through a review just now too, to test whether the existing regulatory framework is actually fit for purpose for AI. So they're trying to understand, do we need specific AI regulation for some areas, or actually as what we've got, will it hold water? So I think it does become a bit of a competitive advantage. Again, I've got a few stats, and there's one here that's saying that AI governance investment has grown 7 times in the last 9 months, between a sort of end of November 24 period up to the end of last year. So it'll probably be that and more. And that's allowing organizations to put things into production faster. So again, governance done right, it allows you to go faster, not slower.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's back to that piece about autonomy levels. If you want to then do more orchestration, to do more span of control, that's going to yield the bigger return. That's where more risk is. But ultimately, if you've got a chessboard that's only got pawns on it, you can only go one square at a time. You can't go diagonal. And you need to start getting some bishops, rooks, knights onto your chessboard at that stage. So that's probably a good metaphor to leave that one there. And for me, that's what responsible AI looks like in real terms. It's how you put all that together to allow you to then get to a point where you can really scale up the autonomy levels.
Totally. On a much smaller level, like completely smaller level, just looking at my recruitment business, it's been running for like 19 and a half years now. And I've had people in the past, Rob Huggins, if you listen, they used to always tell us about compliance and adding details. And when you're putting somebody like yourself on the system with correct addresses, what you're doing, job titles, coding it with your skills and all. So we've been okay with it, but probably not amazing. Coding every candidate we've got, what they're doing, where they are, where they live, what their key skills is. Because I'm starting to kind of have a wee look around at the moment. Usually on Claude, on ChatGPT, what can I do? And I'm putting things in. I've got like 40,000 records across kind of clients and it's just it's a database at the moment. It's a box. And again, if I'd have been much better at compliance and really got everything in order, I'm probably having to get back and do a lot of this work now rather than make things happen. Because
and that's maybe proportionally manageable. But if you're in a business with 5 billion customers, and they've been on, if you take a bank, I've still got my first bank account from, so that's a few decades ago, but that's an accumulation of lots of data, and times were different in the early 90s to where we are today. And again, it surfaces up there, and even like a 5% within a 5 million customer database that has data in there, and if you expose AI to it, how it behaves is probabilistic. You don't really know how it's going to come up with its answer. You need to tell it, don't do this, don't do that. Here's a range to operate in. And that's what drift is. If it starts to move outside of that, it's not one thing. And hallucination is one of maybe 100 KPIs that you need to put around it. So you really need to work out, where do we stand with ethics? What does bias look like? Because that data, going back a few decades, could be a bit of a ticking time bomb for people, because you're then PR is still there, the Information Commission Officer is still looking at that, and how does that affect things? So it's a real, you should not shy away from that. But the bigger the company, the more magnified the problem is.
I know, I think that's how people are so scared of it as well, at times as well, because if you're going to go and do this and do it right, there's a lot of responsibility. And that's what
I'd rather face into it rather than
100%
shirk it. I think you've got to really face into it and sort it out.
Yeah, you need to. Okay then, so we're coming to the kind of end of the podcast now, so a little bit of we like to finish up with one thing that you tell a senior leader who genuinely wants to build enterprise agentic AI capability and not just talk about it.
I'd say 3 things. get your operating model enabled so it can scale, you can do governance, you can build a product catalog, you've got the architecture, but keep iterating. You'll always keep finding something new. It doesn't stop. That's true for any tech for the last few decades, but it's the pace, and AI keeps changing the goalposts on you. So you're going to have to build in a bit of adaptability, agility within that. 2, I would design for reuse from the start. Every agent built as a one-off becomes a liability for you. It's immediately technical debt. Short-term value and long-term reusability shouldn't be mutually exclusive. And then 3, if you skip the foundations, you'll probably spend the next 2 years managing bespoke solutions that can't talk to each other and can't be governed consistently. And all of that isn't sequential. And you've probably got to keep iterating around all of those things simultaneously and just keep doing that and don't stop. It's a continual conveyor belt. So I would stop asking how to make your existing processes faster. I'd start asking what becomes possible that wasn't possible before.
Yep.
And I'd say that's the real question Agentic AI puts on the table. And most organizations are still haven't asked that question, or maybe really had a clarity on how to ask it.
Brilliant. Really good. Thanks very much for that. There's loads of great points in this. I always, when I finish these ones, I'm really keen to get them out to the listeners. So thanks very much. Stuart, and see, before we finish, where can people find you? If people are listening to the show and they want to maybe talk to you or ask you questions or get in touch, what's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I try and compartmentalize my life a little bit.
Yep.
So for a lot of this stuff, it's probably LinkedIn for me. Just look me up there and drop me a DM there, and always keen to have those conversations. I've had a lot of really great discussions over the last few months with various people, and it helps really for me to get a bit of a bead on things. So yeah, just look for me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way.
Excellent. And we've got you. We've managed to secure you to speak on the start of September at the meetup in Edinburgh. The more details will follow for that.
Yeah, looking forward to that too.
That'd be really good. Okay, so that's it for this one. So to recap, if you take one thing away, make it this: stop asking how to make your existing processes faster and start asking what becomes possible that wasn't before. That's the real question Agentic AI puts on the table. Big thanks to Stuart. Links to connect with him are in the show notes. If this was useful, share it with someone in your organisation who's trying to make AI actually stick. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to take 2 seconds to hit subscribe to support the show. See you next time. Thanks very much.